I didn't hire a private investigator because I wanted closure. That's what I told myself at first, but it wasn't true. Closure is something people chase when they're trying to feel better. I wasn't trying to feel better. I was trying to survive the quiet. The silence in my apartment had gotten so loud it felt like it was pressing against my skull. Every little thing echoed, my footsteps, the hum of the fridge, even my own breathing at night. It had been 8 months since Daniel left, and somehow the space he used to fill kept getting bigger instead of smaller. I cheated on him. That's the part that always makes people stop listening, or worse, decide they already understand everything. Like it's simple, like I'm just another selfish wife who got bored and blew up her life for something temporary. But nothing about it felt simple while it was happening, and nothing about it feels simple now. Daniel and I had been married for 6 years. We met in Chicago, both working entry-level jobs we hated, both convinced we were meant for something bigger. He was steady in a way that felt rare, calm, patient, the kind of man who didn't raise his voice, even when he had every reason to. I used to joke that he was emotionally bulletproof. He'd just smile and say, "I just don't like wasting energy on things that don't matter." Back then, I thought that made him strong. Later, I started wondering if it meant I didn't matter enough to shake him. We built a life the way most people do. We moved into a decent apartment, upgraded to a townhouse after a few years, got a dog we swore we'd train properly but never really did. Weekends were grocery runs, Netflix, the occasional dinner with friends. It was stable, predictable, safe. And somewhere along the line, safe started to feel like suffocating. I don't know exactly when the shift happened. It wasn't like a switch flipped overnight. It was slower than that, more subtle. Conversations got shorter. The way he looked at me changed. Less curiosity, more familiarity. We stopped asking each other questions. We already knew the answers, or at least we thought we did. I started feeling invisible, like I was fading into the background of my own life. I'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror and try to remember the last time someone looked at me like I was something new, something worth discovering. Daniel loved me, I never doubted that. But his love was quiet, consistent, predictable, and eventually it stopped feeling like enough. That's when I met Ryan. It was at work, of course it was. That's how these things always start, right? Somewhere ordinary, somewhere harmless. He transferred into our department, and from the second he walked in, everything about him felt louder. Not in an obnoxious way, just present. He noticed things. He made eye contact when you talked. He laughed like he actually meant it. The first time he really spoke to me, I remember feeling caught off guard by how focused he was, like I was the only person in the room. "You always this serious, or is today just special?" he asked, leaning against the edge of my desk. I rolled my eyes, but I smiled. "I'm working." "Yeah, I can see that," he said. "Just seems like you're trying to solve world hunger, not spreadsheets." It was stupid, a dumb throwaway conversation, but I thought about it later that night. The way he looked at me, the way it felt to be seen again. That's how it started, not with anything dramatic, just small moments that felt bigger than they should have. We started talking more. At first, it was just work stuff. Then it became lunch breaks, then inside jokes, then texting. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself I deserved a little excitement, something that was just mine. That's the lie that made everything else possible. Ryan wasn't like Daniel. He was impulsive, a little reckless. He'd text me things in the middle of the day, like, "You ever just want to disappear for a weekend and not tell anyone where you went?" And instead of brushing it off, I'd feel this pull in my chest, like maybe I did. He made me feel interesting again, wanted, alive. The first time he touched me, it wasn't even intentional. We were walking out of the office together, and his hand brushed against mine. It lingered just a second too long. That second changed everything. I should have pulled away. I should have gone home and told Daniel the truth, that something was happening, that I felt off, that we needed to fix whatever had broken between us. Instead, I said nothing. And silence is where betrayal grows. The night it actually happened, I remember thinking how ordinary everything looked. His apartment wasn't special, just another city place. Minimal furniture, dim lighting, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the counter. We stood there for a minute, neither of us saying anything. "You don't have to stay," he said finally. But his voice didn't sound like he wanted me to leave. "I know," I said, and then I stayed. I wish I could say I felt overwhelming guilt in that moment, that something inside me screamed to stop. But that's not how it felt. It felt inevitable, like I'd been walking toward that exact moment for weeks, maybe longer. Afterward, lying there in the quiet, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process what I'd just done. I expected regret to hit me immediately.
It didn't. What I felt instead was this strange mix of relief and terror, like I'd crossed a line I could never uncross, and somehow that made everything clearer. I didn't tell Daniel. Not the next day, not the next week. I kept seeing Ryan. It became a routine, something I slipped into between the cracks of my real life. I got good at it, at lying, at hiding things, at pretending nothing had changed. But things had changed. Everything had. Daniel noticed, of course. He wasn't stupid. He just wasn't the kind of person who jumped to conclusions. He'd ask small questions, subtle ones. "You've been working late a lot," he said one night, standing in the kitchen while I scrolled through my phone. "Yeah, we've got a big project coming up," I replied without looking up. He nodded, like he accepted it, like he trusted me. That trust started to feel heavier than any guilt. The moment everything fell apart wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no accusations, just quiet. I came home one evening and he was sitting on the couch, hands clasped together, staring at the floor. Something in my chest tightened immediately. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. He looked at me, and I knew. Before he even said anything, I knew. "Are you seeing someone?" he asked, just like that. No anger, no raised voice, just a question. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could lie. I could deny everything and maybe drag it out longer, keep living in that half-real world I'd built. Instead, I said yes. The word felt like it shattered something in the room. He nodded slowly, like he was confirming something to himself. "Okay," he said. That was it. No yelling, no tears. Just okay. He stood up, walked past me, and went into the bedroom. I stood there, frozen, listening to the sound of drawers opening and closing. He packed a bag. I followed him, my heart racing. "Daniel, wait, we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," he said calmly, not even looking at me. "That's not true." "You made your decision," he interrupted, zipping up the bag. "I'm just making mine." I'd never seen him like that. Not angry, not emotional.
Just done. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Does it matter?" Yes, I wanted to say. It matters more than anything. But the truth was, I'd already shown him it didn't. He walked out that night without slamming the door, without looking back. And just like that, 6 years of marriage ended in silence. I thought he'd call, or text, or come back after a few days once things cooled down. He didn't. Weeks passed, then months. I tried reaching out at first, calls that went straight to voicemail, messages that never got a response. It was like he'd erased himself from my life completely. Ryan didn't last much longer after that. Once the secrecy was gone, so was the excitement. Turns out we didn't have much left when reality stepped in. So I lost both of them. That's the part no one really talks about, how you don't just lose the person you betrayed, you lose the version of yourself that existed before you made that choice. The version that believed you'd never be this kind of person. By the time 8 months had passed, I realized something that scared me more than anything else. Daniel wasn't coming back, and I didn't know where he was. That's when the idea started creeping in. At first, it felt ridiculous, desperate, but desperation has a way of making things feel reasonable. I didn't want to move on. I didn't want closure. I wanted to find him, not to fix things, not even to apologize. I just needed to know what he'd become without me. So I hired a private investigator, and I had no idea that decision was about to destroy me in a way I wasn't prepared for. The guy I hired didn't look like what I expected. For some reason, I had this image in my head, older, trench coat energy, maybe a little rough around the edges, like someone who'd seen too much. Instead, when I walked into his office in a mid-rise building downtown, I found a man in his late 30s wearing a fitted button-down, sitting behind a clean desk with 2 monitors and a half-finished iced coffee. "Claire Mitchell?" he asked, standing up and offering a hand. I nodded. "Yeah." "Evan Brooks," he said. "Have a seat." His voice was calm, professional, but not cold. It made everything feel more real than I wanted it to. I sat across from him, suddenly unsure of how to start. For the past week, I'd been building this up in my head, convincing myself I needed to do this. But now that I was actually there, it felt invasive, like I was about to cross another line I couldn't undo. "So," he said, sitting back down and folding his hands, "you're trying to locate someone." I swallowed. "My husband. Or ex-husband, I guess." He didn't react to that, just nodded slightly. "Name?" "Daniel Mitchell." "Age?" 34. "Last known location?" "Our house. Well, the townhouse we used to share. He left about 8 months ago." Evan typed as I spoke, the soft clicking of the keyboard filling the silence between my sentences. "Do you have any idea where he might have gone? Family, friends, workplace changes?" I shook my head.
He doesn't really have close family nearby. His parents are in Oregon, but I checked with them early on. They said they hadn't heard from him either. That's unusual, Evan said, glancing up at me briefly. I know, I replied quickly, my chest tightening. That's why I'm here. He studied me for a second, like he was trying to figure something out. And you haven't had any contact at all? Phone, email, social media? No. It's like he just disappeared. That wasn't entirely true. He hadn't disappeared in a literal sense. He still existed somewhere. But in my world, in my day-to-day life, it was like he'd been erased. No digital footprint I could find, no updates, nothing. Evan leaned back slightly. Okay, I can look into it. I'll need some basic info. Social security number if you have it, previous employers, any accounts you know of. The more you give me, the easier it'll be. I nodded, already reaching into my bag. I'd come prepared. Too prepared, probably. I handed him a folder with everything I could gather. Documents, copies, even old photos. He flipped through it, raising an eyebrow slightly. You've done some homework. I just need to find him, I said, the words coming out tighter than I meant them to. He closed the folder and set it down. Can I ask why? The question hit harder than I expected. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the strap of my purse. I just need to talk to him. That's not usually enough to hire someone like me, he said gently. Not accusing, just stating a fact. I looked down at my hands. For a second, I considered lying, giving him some cleaner, more acceptable version of the truth. But something about the situation made that feel pointless. I cheated on him, I said quietly. He found out. He left. And now I can't find him. Evan didn't react right away. No judgment, no surprise, just silence as he processed it. Do you think he doesn't want to be found? He asked after a moment. The question felt like a punch to the chest. I don't know, I admitted, but I need to try. He nodded slowly. All right, I'll see what I can do. It might take a few days, maybe longer depending on how far off the grid he's gone. That's fine, I said quickly. I don't care how long it takes. He gave me a small, almost sympathetic look. I'll be in touch. Walking out of that office, I felt something shift inside me, like I just set something in motion that I wouldn't be able to control. The first few days were the worst. Waiting has a way of amplifying everything you're trying not to think about. Every memory came back sharper, louder. The way Daniel used to leave notes on the fridge. The way he'd absent-mindedly reach for my hand when we walked anywhere. The way he looked at me the night he asked that question. Are you seeing someone? I started replaying that moment over and over, like if I looked at it from enough angles, I'd find a version where I answered differently, where things didn't end the way they did. But there wasn't one. By the fourth day, I was barely sleeping. I checked my phone constantly, even though I knew Evan would call when he had something. When the call finally came, it caught me off guard. I was sitting on the couch, staring at nothing, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My heart jumped into my throat as I answered. Hello? Claire, it's Evan. I sat up straight immediately. Yeah, hi. I've got something, he said. Just those 3 words made my chest tighten. Okay, I said, my voice barely steady. What did you find? There was a slight pause on the other end. Not long, but enough to make my stomach twist. He didn't disappear, Evan said. Not exactly. What does that mean? It means he changed things. Identity markers, contact info, employment. He made himself harder to track, but not impossible. I gripped the edge of the couch. So you found him? Yes. The word hit me harder than I expected. Found. Like he was something that had been lost. Like he hadn't been actively avoiding me this whole time. Where is he? I asked quickly. He's in Denver now, Evan said. Been there for about 6 months. Denver. The word echoed in my head. It felt random, distant. A completely different life. What's he doing? I asked. He's working for a mid-sized construction firm, project management, from what I can tell. Different company than before. I tried to picture.
Daniel in a new city, new job, new routine. Living a life that didn't include me at all. Is he okay? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. There was another pause. That depends on what you mean by okay, Evan said carefully. My chest tightened. What does that mean? It means he's functioning. He's working, he's stable, he's moved on in certain ways. Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. What kind of certain ways? I asked. Evan exhaled quietly. Claire, before I go further, I need to ask, are you sure you want all the details? Yes, I said immediately. Too quickly. I need to know. Another pause. He's not living alone, Evan said. The words hit like a physical blow. What? I whispered. He's been sharing a place with someone for about 4 months now. My mind immediately filled in the blanks, even before he said anything else. A roommate?
I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Evan didn't sugarcoat it. A woman. The room felt like it tilted slightly. 4 months. That meant, what? He met someone 2 months after leaving? Maybe sooner? I pressed my hand against my forehead, trying to steady myself. Do you know who she is? I have a name, he said. Do you want it? I hesitated. For a second, I almost said no, almost protected myself from hearing it, from making it more real. But I'd already come this far. Yes, I said. He told me. And just like that, this vague, distant idea of Daniel's new life became something concrete, something real. A name, a person, someone who was standing in the space I used to occupy. Are they serious? I asked, hating myself for the question, but needing the answer anyway. They live together, Evan said simply. Make of that what you will. I let out a shaky breath, my chest tightening in a way I couldn't control. Of course he moved on. Of course he didn't spend 8 months sitting in the dark replaying everything like I did. Why would he? I was the one who broke it. Do you have an address? I asked after a moment. Yes. Send it to me. There was a pause on the line again, heavier this time. Claire, Evan said, his tone shifting slightly. I need to say this. You finding him doesn't mean he wants to see you. I know, I said, even though hearing it out loud made something twist inside me. And if he went to the lengths he did to make himself hard to find, there's a reason for that. I know, I repeated, more firmly this time. Another pause. I'll send you the details, he said finally. Thank you. When the call ended, I just sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Denver. A woman. A new life. It felt like I'd just opened a door I wasn't ready to walk through, but I knew I was going to, because now that I knew where he was, there was no way I wasn't going to see him. I told myself I just needed closure, just one conversation, just to understand. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. I wanted to see his face when he saw me again. I wanted to know if there was anything left, even if it destroyed me. So 2 days later, I booked a flight to Denver, and I didn't tell a single person where I was going. The flight to Denver felt longer than it actually was. I barely remember takeoff. I barely remember landing. The whole time, my mind was running in circles, replaying every possible version of what could happen when I saw him. None of them felt real. None of them felt like something I could actually prepare for. I kept picturing his face, not the version from 8 months ago, standing in our living room asking me that quiet, devastating question. Not the version walking out the door with a single bag and no intention of coming back. I kept picturing older memories, safer ones. Daniel laughing in the kitchen while trying to flip pancakes and failing miserably. Daniel falling asleep on the couch with the dog half on top of him. Daniel reaching for my hand in the car without even looking. Those were the versions of him that felt real to me. Not this stranger in Denver who had replaced me with someone else. When the plane landed, my chest felt tight in a way that made it hard to breathe, like something inside me was already bracing for impact. I got a rental car, barely paying attention to the details, and drove to the address Evan had sent me. It was a quiet neighborhood. Not flashy, not run down either, just normal. Tree-lined streets, a few parked cars, small front yards, the kind of place people move to when they're trying to build something steady. It made sense. Daniel was always like that. He didn't chase chaos. He built stability. I parked about half a block away. I don't know how long I sat there. 5 minutes, maybe 20? Time didn't feel real anymore. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt, but I didn't let go. I kept staring at the house. It was a 2-story place with light gray siding and a small porch. There was a plant by the front door, slightly overgrown, like someone meant to take care of it but didn't always have the time. A car was parked in the driveway. Not his old one. Of course not. Everything about this place felt like proof that his life had moved forward without me. I wasn't part of it anymore. That realization hit differently when I was sitting right in front of it. I almost left. That's the part I don't tell people when they ask me about that day. I almost started the car, drove back to the airport, and pretended I never came. Because as long as I didn't see him, there was still a version of reality where things weren't completely over. But once I knocked on that door, there was no going back to that illusion. Eventually, I forced myself to get out of the car. Each step toward the house felt heavier than the last, like I was walking through something thick and invisible that didn't want me to reach the door. When I got to the porch, I hesitated again. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I raised my hand to knock, then lowered it. I wasn't ready. but I also knew I never would be. So I knocked anyway. 3 short, sharp knocks. The sound echoed louder than it should have. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard movement inside. Footsteps. My entire body went tense. The door opened. And for a split second, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. Because it wasn't Daniel. It was her. She stood there, looking at me with a mix of confusion and mild curiosity. She was probably around my age, maybe a little younger. Blonde hair pulled back loosely, wearing an oversized sweater and leggings like she'd been home for a while. She looked comfortable, like she belonged there. "Hi?" she said, her tone polite but cautious. My mouth went dry. Hi, I managed. "Can I help you?" she asked. I stared at her for a second too long, trying to connect this real person in front of me with the abstract idea I'd built in my head. This was the woman Evan had mentioned. This was the person who lived with him, who saw him every day, who occupied the space I used to fill. "I'm looking for Daniel," I said finally. Something in her expression shifted slightly. Not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. "Who are you?" she asked. There it was, the question I'd been dreading. I swallowed, forcing the words out. "I'm his wife." The silence that followed felt like it stretched forever.
Her eyes flickered, just for a second, and then she looked past me briefly, like she was checking something in her head. "He doesn't have a wife," she said carefully. The words hit like a slap. "I do," I said, my voice tightening. "Or I did. We're not officially divorced." She studied me for a moment, her expression shifting from confusion to something more guarded. "Wait here," she said finally. And then she closed the door, just like that. I stood there on the porch, my heart racing, every nerve in my body on edge. I could hear muffled voices inside. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew one of them was his. I knew it. My chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. Then the door opened again, and there he was. For a second, everything else disappeared. It was just him. Daniel looked different, not in a dramatic, unrecognizable way, but enough that it felt like I was looking at a version of him that had lived an entire life without me. His hair was a little shorter, his posture slightly more rigid. There was something in his face that hadn't been there before, something closed off, but it was still him, and seeing him again after 8 months felt like getting the air knocked out of me. "Hi," I said softly. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked at me, not shocked, not angry, just still. "What are you doing here?" he asked finally. His voice was calm, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something I couldn't quite read. "I needed to see you," I said. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to process the situation. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. "I didn't know how else to find you." "That was kind of the point," he replied. The words landed hard. I felt my throat tighten. "You just disappeared, Daniel. You didn't answer anything. You lost the right to that," he cut in, not raising his voice, but making it clear he meant it. I flinched slightly. Behind him, I could feel her presence, watching, listening. "I just want to talk," I said, my voice softer now. "There's nothing to talk about." "That's not true," I said quickly. "You don't get to just erase 6 years like it didn't happen." Something in his expression shifted at that. Not softer, not warmer, sharper. "I didn't erase anything," he said. "You did." The words hit deeper than anything else he'd said so far. "I know I messed up," I said, my voice starting to shake despite my effort to keep it steady. "I know what I did was wrong, but that doesn't mean we just stop," he said. Just one word, but it was enough to shut me up instantly. He took a small step forward, just enough to lower his voice slightly so it wouldn't carry as much inside. "You don't get to show up here, unannounced, after 8 months, and act like this is something we can just sit down and unpack," he said. "That's not how this works." I felt my chest tighten again. "I'm not saying it is. I needed to see you. I needed to know if what?" he asked. The question hung there between us. If what? If there was still something left? If he missed me? If I still mattered? I couldn't say it out loud. "I just needed to see you," I repeated, weaker this time. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said something that I wasn't prepared for. "I know you hired someone to find me." The words hit like a shock through my entire body. "What?" I whispered. "I know about the PI," he said. "You think I wouldn't notice someone digging into my life?
My stomach dropped. I wasn't trying to what? He interrupted. Respect my space. I had no answer, because there wasn't one. You tracked me down, he continued. You showed up at my house. You told her you're my wife. His jaw tightened slightly. You're not my wife anymore, Claire. That one hurt more than everything else combined. I never signed anything, I said weakly. I did, he replied. My head snapped up. What? I filed months ago, he said. You should be getting the final paperwork soon. The world tilted slightly. He filed. He moved on. He built a new life. And he didn't tell me any of it. I didn't know, I said, my voice barely there. I didn't want you to, he said simply. Silence fell between us again, heavier this time. Final. Cold. Behind him, I saw her shift slightly, like she wasn't sure if she should stay or give us space. And in that moment, it hit me in a way it hadn't fully before. This wasn't my place anymore. I wasn't part of his life. I was just someone who showed up from a past he had already walked away from. I think you should go, he said finally. No anger, no hesitation, just a boundary. And for the first time since I got there, I realized something that made my chest feel hollow. I wasn't here to get closure. I was here to face the reality that there wasn't anything left to close. I don't remember walking back to the car. I know I did, obviously. I know I turned around, stepped off the porch, walked down that short path, and made it back to where I'd parked. But it felt like my body was moving on autopilot, like I had disconnected from it just enough to get through those steps without breaking down right there in front of him. The last thing I saw before I turned away was the door closing. Not slammed, not hesitated on, just closed, like I had never belonged there in the first place. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring straight ahead, my hands resting in my lap. Everything inside me felt hollow, like something had been scooped out and left empty. I thought I was prepared for that moment. I thought I understood what it would feel like to see him again, to hear him say he had moved on, to stand in front of the life he built without me. I wasn't, because none of the versions I imagined included how calm he would be. That's what kept replaying in my head. Not anger, not bitterness, not even sadness. Calm. Like I didn't matter enough anymore to disrupt anything in his world. That realization hit deeper than any kind of rejection I had prepared for. I don't know how long I sat there before I finally started the car. The engine sounded louder than it should have, breaking through the quiet that had settled around me. I drove without thinking, just following the road until I realized I had no idea where I was going. Eventually, I pulled into a random parking lot outside a grocery store and turned the engine off again. That's when it hit me. Not all at once. Not like some dramatic breakdown. It was slower, heavier. The kind of realization that sinks in piece by piece until you can't ignore it anymore. He wasn't coming back. Not eventually. Not someday. Not if I said the right thing or waited long enough or proved that I had changed. He was gone. And the version of him that I loved, the one who used to look at me like I was everything, was gone too. Not because he disappeared, but because I destroyed that version of him. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against the steering wheel, closing my eyes as my chest tightened. For months, I had been living in this strange in-between space, telling myself that things were broken but not beyond repair, that there was still something left to salvage. Seeing him today shattered that illusion completely. There was nothing left. Not even resentment. And somehow, that hurt the most. Because resentment would have meant I still had a place in his emotions. But indifference?
That meant I had become irrelevant. I sat there until my phone buzzed. The sound startled me, pulling me out of the spiral just enough to look down at the screen. It was Evan. For a second, I considered ignoring it, but I answered anyway. "Hey," I said, my voice quieter than usual. "Hey," he replied. "Just checking in. I saw your location ping earlier near the address I gave you." Of course he did. "I went," I said. There was a pause. "Yeah?" "I saw him." Another pause, slightly longer this time. "And?" he asked carefully. I let out a small breath that didn't feel like it relieved anything. "He's fine," I said. "Better than fine, actually." I could hear him shifting slightly on the other end, like he was adjusting how he wanted to respond. "Did you talk?" he asked. "Yeah." "How'd that go?" I let out a quiet, almost humorless laugh. Exactly how you'd expect. "That bad?" "No," I said, staring at nothing. That's the thing. It wasn't bad. Silence stretched between us for a moment. He wasn't angry, I continued. He wasn't upset. He was just done. Evan didn't interrupt. "He filed for divorce," I added, my voice tightening slightly as I said it out loud. "I figured that might be the case," he said. "I didn't even know," I admitted. "He didn't tell me. He just handled it."
Another pause. Claire, Evan said carefully, what were you hoping would happen? The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to answer, then stopped. Because I didn't have a clean answer. I don't know, I said finally. I thought maybe if I saw him, if we talked, you thought there might still be something there, he finished. I closed my eyes. Yeah. And now? I swallowed, feeling that hollow space in my chest again. Now I know there isn't. The words felt heavier than anything I'd said so far. Final. Real. Evan let a few seconds pass before speaking again. Sometimes people don't leave loudly, he said. They just decide they're done and move on. I know, I said quietly. We sat in silence for a moment longer. Do you need anything? He asked eventually. The question lingered. Did I? For months, I thought I needed answers, closure, something to hold on to. But now that I had seen him, talked to him, stood in front of the life he built without me, there wasn't anything left to get. No, I said finally. I think I got what I came for, even if it wasn't what I wanted. All right, he said. If you need anything else, you've got my number. Thank you, I said. We hung up and the silence returned. But it felt different now. Heavier, but clearer. I sat there for a while longer, before finally starting the car again. This time, I knew where I was going. Back to the airport. The drive felt slower, more deliberate, like I was actually present for it now, instead of just moving through it. I noticed things I hadn't on the way there, the way the mountains sat in the distance, the way the light hit the buildings, the way people moved through their lives without knowing anything about mine. It was strange. Everything kept going. Nothing paused just because my world had shifted. At the airport, everything felt routine. People checking bags, standing in lines, scrolling through their phones. Normal life happening all around me while I carried something heavy and invisible through it. I boarded the plane and took my seat, staring out the window as the city slowly got smaller beneath me. Denver faded into the distance, and with it, the last version of my life that I had been holding on to. The flight back felt quieter than the one there, not because anything had changed around me, but because something inside me had finally settled. Not in a peaceful way, just in a way that accepted what was real. When I got back to my apartment, the silence was still there. The same hum of the fridge, the same empty space. But it didn't feel as loud anymore, because now I understood it. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't something waiting to be fixed. This was my life now. I walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, looking around at everything that used to feel shared. It didn't anymore. It just felt like mine, for better or worse. My phone buzzed again a few minutes later. A new email. I opened it without thinking. It was from a law office. Attached was a document. Finalized. I stared at it for a long time, my finger hovering over the screen. This was it. The official end of something that had already been over for months. Slowly, I opened the attachment. My name, his name, signatures, dates. All of it laid out in clean legal language that didn't come close to capturing what any of it actually meant. 6 years reduced to paperwork. I let out a slow breath and set the phone down beside me. There was no dramatic reaction, no tears. Just that same quiet, steady weight settling into place. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, I wasn't wondering where he was. I wasn't imagining different outcomes. I wasn't holding on to anything that didn't exist anymore. I had my answer. And it broke me in a way I didn't see coming. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. He didn't ask about me. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look back. And that told me everything I needed to know. I closed my eyes, letting the silence settle around me. Not as something I needed to escape, but as something I finally understood. Because this time, it wasn't empty. It was just honest,